Alright, so the plan this week was to spend the first 2 days working on basic equations with application problems and then kind of move on to two other things. The first thing we're going to deal with today is application problems with inequalities, and tomorrow we will look at application problems with proportions. Again, application problems with inequalities are difficult to deal with. The only tough part though, the main tough part though, is just understanding how to describe the answer. Because whenever you deal with an inequality, whenever you dealt with equations application problems, you would be able to say the number is 17 or the number is 53 or there were 45 items or it'll take 45 minutes. With inequalities, you have to say greater than 6 hours or less than 6 hours or greater than or equal to 6 hours or whatever it might be, and that's again the tough part, is just making sure you know how to describe it. And so therefore whenever you find these answers, you will still use similar strategies, but when you find these answers you then have to kind of go back and think, where the range of answers are. Ted weighs 130 pounds. In order to participate in a wrestling match, he must weigh more than 150 pounds. How many pounds must Ted gain? So similar to what we did earlier this week, we understand we're going to take 150 minus 130 to get 20 as the critical value. Now 20, the critical value, what I mean by that is the number where everything starts or everything revolves around. But it doesn't mean that 20 is always included. It also, we have to determine whether we want 21, 22, and 23, which would be greater than 20, or 19, 18, 17, which is less than 20. And again, that is the tough part about inequalities. Here's the thing. You want to weigh more than 150 pounds, which means we definitely want things that are greater than 20. But here's the thing that you always have to ask yourself, and the word is inclusive. I-N-C-L-U-S-I-V-E. The question is 20 inclusive in this? So in other words, if I put 20 pounds on what's here, does it work? So what you probably want to do sometimes is just say, okay, 130 plus 20, which we already know what it is, which is 150. Is 150 pounds a qualifier for what is there? So it says more than 150, but notice more than 150 does not include 150 because 150 is not more than 150. So therefore, your answer there would be greater than 20, which means numbers like 21, 22, 23, 24, and so on beyond that point. That's how many pounds he would have to gain in order to do it. But again, 20 pounds is not enough because 130 plus 20 puts me right on that critical point, and that critical point based off of the word more than is not included. So when you work these problems out, just make sure that you ask yourself, is the number that I have included? It might take some calculator work. It might just take some extra thought. If anything, bring it up to me so I can kind of discuss with you the strategy you could use to answer it. But other than that, like I said, just take your time. It's only 5 questions worth of work on the test, but you just want to make sure you're aware and taking your time on doing that. Most of the problems that you see will require whole numbers. If we're talking about people or a number of items, for example, you don't have 0.23 or 0.5 of a person, 1/2 of a person, or 1/3 of a person. I just imagine would be disturbing to see. So people you typically want to have as a whole number, and you can't go to a store and purchase 7.5 volleyballs. You would have to purchase 3 volleyballs, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 volleyballs. Again, you can't have a decimal in terms of those. So we typically don't think in terms of decimals in certain situations. Topics that pertain to time are tricky because they can be taken in decimal form, but it just depends on what the problem is asking for. So what you want to do is, especially on the computer work that we do, typically the computer problem has a little parentheses there that says they either want you to round it to the 10th, or they want you to round it to the 100th, or they want to the nearest whole number. And so you want to make sure you think about that, especially on a computer, because if it's on the computers are not forgiving at all, and you want to make sure that you give it the answer that it is looking for. Also, be sure to think more about whether the value is included in your answer. So again, that's the inclusive part. Do we include the 20? Do we not include the 20? Should it be this symbol or that symbol in terms of what is there? On this computer, you're going to have an option on a lot of these that give you the option to choose one of these, and you want to make sure that you choose the right one whenever you answer that question. So another quick example. A child is 54 inches tall, growing at a rate of 2.3 inches per year. How many years will it be until the child is taller than 60 inches? So this is a two-step equation. The first thing most of us would do is subtract 60 from 50, or 54 from 60, to find out that the child needs to reach at least 6 inches to reach its critical height. again, the critical number that makes them equal. And so then we take that 6 and divide by 2.3 to find out exactly what we're looking for. And we get the answer of, and again, it depends on what we're looking for. If they say the nearest whole number, or the number that actually is there, then what we would say is, since it's 2.6, I wouldn't round it, because once 2.6 inches or 2 point years is needed, it's more than 2. And so if it was a whole number answer, I would say I would use the critical number of 3 years, because 3 years to me is the first year when it actually works. Again, 2 years is not enough, as you see, because it takes 2.6, and so 3 years would be my answer there. If you're talking about the 10th, then you would want to use 2.6. If you're talking about 100th, you would use 2.61. And so that's, again, where you want to make sure you read the problem and make sure you know what's going on. But in terms of your descriptor, if you push it up to 3 years, then you would say greater than or equal to 3 years, because 3 is inclusive in that answer. I will tell you that on the software I have, I did not leave an option for greater than or equal to 2, or greater than 2, so don't do that one. Move your answer up to the number that actually works. But other than that, like I said, greater than or equal to 3 would be one way if it wants a whole number answer. 2.6 is actually on that number there. So if you want it to be taller than 60, then honestly what's going to happen is you're probably going to have to pass the 2.6. And again, here's what I would do. I would go ahead and work this out in the real part. So 2.3 times 3, just to see if 3 works. You could do 2.3 times 3 plus the 54 and see if that's bigger than 60, and notice that you get 60.9. That is how you know that 3 is included. How do you know 2 is not included? Because 2.3 times 2 plus 54 is not taller than 60 inches. Same thing for 2.6. Once you find your 2.6, you know it has to be greater than 2.6, but we don't know if it's included. So what I would do is take 2.3 times 2.6 plus your 54 to see if that's bigger than 60, and you notice it's really close to 60, but it's not there yet, which means that you want to be just greater than 2.6 and don't include it. Also, if you're going by tenth, just check out the next number, 2.3. Since 2.6 was my answer, move it up by 1/10 times 2.7 and see that it actually is greater than 2.6, and you add that to 54, and notice that that is bigger than 60. So yes, you would either want greater than or equal to 3 if they wanted a whole number answer, or greater than 2.6 if they wanted the tenth answer. But again, sometimes you just got to take your calculator, plug in the information, and think. That is really the only tough part about inequalities, is going through that. The good news is, whenever you see this stuff on multiple choice tests, you typically have answers already in front of you, and you can use your common sense to answer those things. Honestly, these problems are not tough in terms of finding the critical value. As I said, you already know from the last couple days how to find the answer, hopefully. The critical value is just the value that equals the desired answer. But remember, we're talking about asking ourselves, are the rest of the answers larger or smaller? You might want to write those two things down if you have issues with this stuff. And also, is the answer included in the accepted range? Again, this just asks whether I put a line under it or whether I do a regular greater than or less than. So please get some practice on these problems so you can get ready for Friday's tests. Be sure to ask for assistance and use your time wisely. The reason we took an assessment yesterday is because the applications test is 25 questions long, and you have to take it twice over the course of this quarter. So please don't waste attempts unless you plan on coming in before or after school to get better grades, and you don't want to put yourself in that position. So if you just knock today out, make sure you understand it, make sure you use today as well as you can. That would be a good thing for you to do. With material moving at this pace, which this is 135, and if you have an issue with the pace you need to drop, you will be learning new things almost every day. Like, there'll be a couple days we review, but most of the days we're either going to be learning something new or assessing things that we already know. Many of you still are not using your time wisely, but I do recognize that a lot of you have seemed to have learned the best way to utilize class time. I see a lot of people who had low grades in the first quarter who weren't used to it now just knocking out the material, and they have things together. Again, just be sure to remember, common sense wise, that if you waste one day of time, then it creates a day where you have to work twice as hard to make up for it. So if you decide to take a day off, on Monday, then expect to work twice as hard on one of the other days a week if you want to keep up, because again, we are moving every day and we're moving forward every day. So just be sure to make good choices. Good luck.